I've always had a fascination with classics. My mom had this shelf of fancy editions that I really wanted to read. So I ended up around the age of 12 reading some Shakespeare, some Austen, Dickens, Hawthorne, but somehow I never read Wuthering Heights. Now I have, and now I know why I did not read it before. Wuthering Heights is a dark, dramatic story about two people destroying their lives and those of everyone around them. And I mean everyone. Not a single character, except maybe Mr. Lockwood, is left unscathed by the aftermath of Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. Many of the themes in Emily Bronte's Gothic novel Wuthering Heights are tied to forbidden passion, revenge, and sin. From the onset of the story, Catherine's and Heathcliff's fondness for each other is seen as unnatural. The housekeeper and main narrator of the story, Nellie Dean, says, "She was much too fond of Heathcliff. The greatest punishment we could invent for her was to keep her separate from him." Catherine's brother Henley dislikes Heathcliff throughout the story. He wanted to keep Heathcliff miserable and keep him away from Catherine. The actions of Henley and Edgar, Catherine's eventual husband, to divide the couple are what spur Heathcliff's lifelong ambitions of revenge against the two. In the book, forbidden love and revenge are intertwined. One cannot exist in the novel without the other. Incest is a form of romance which is typically forbidden, for good reason, but it's prevalent in the novel. Implied or outright incest are recurring in the narrative and are crucial to the themes of passion and vengeance. Heathcliff is brought into the Earnshaw family when he and Catherine are children. Mr. Earnshaw returns from a trip with an orphan boy to whom he felt strangely drawn. A common reading of the text is that Heathcliff was Mr. Earnshaw's illegitimate son and therefore the sibling of Henley and Catherine. About this interpretation, critic Eric Solomon wrote, "This section of the novel is strangely unsatisfactory, leaving many questions unresolved. In Nellie Dean's narrative, no reason is suggested for Earnshaw's visit to Liverpool. In addition, Heathcliff soon becomes Earnshaw's favorite, more cherished than his own children, an unnatural occurrence surely, unless this is a natural child. Nellie has her suspicions. Earnshaw, she comments, took to the child strangely, this poor fatherless child, as he called him." Strangely, Heathcliff, who oddly seems to have had no name before he was brought into the Earnshaw family, is named after a previous son of Mr. Earnshaw who died. "I found they had christened him Heathcliff. It was the name of a son who died in childhood, and it has served him ever since, both for Christian and surname." If Emily Bronte intentionally included this implication, then Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship is doomed by nature from the start. This is something that the novel plays with a little, where Catherine actually dreams that she's kicked out of heaven basically because she loves Heathcliff. So she, instead of being in heaven, chooses to, or is forced to come back down to earth and be with him. Additionally, their connection to each other is stronger than mere attraction. If Mr. Earnshaw is Heathcliff's father, then they're connected by blood. After Catherine marries Edgar rather than Heathcliff, Heathcliff chooses to pursue Edgar's younger sister, Isabella. Heathcliff had not the habit of bestowing a single unnecessary civility on Miss Linton, I knew. Now, as soon as he beheld her, his first precaution was to take a sweeping survey of the house front. Supposing himself unseen, the scoundrel had the impudence to embrace her. Now he and Catherine are further tied together. Regardless of whether they are blood relatives or not, they're adopted siblings, and once Heathcliff marries Isabella, they're siblings by law. The families they make for themselves are tied together. They are now brother and sister by marriage. Their romantic relationship is even more impossible now that they both are married, but they're still irrevocably bound together, both by Mr. Earnshaw and by having married into the same family. the quasi-incest here happens solely due to Heathcliff's need for revenge. He pursues Isabella specifically to get back at Edgar and Catherine. This desire for revenge also leads to the next set of incest in the novel, where it becomes very relevant that Catherine and Heathcliff married a pair of siblings. Heathcliff decides to have his son marry Catherine and Edgar's daughter, also named Kathy. My design is as honest as possible. I'll inform you of its whole scope, he said, that the two cousins may fall in love and get married. This union is the first outright incestuous relationship of the book, because it's worth noting that Catherine and Heathcliff never engage in any sort of behavior romantically. They're clearly in love with each other, or more accurately, obsessed with each other, but they never kiss or go further than that. In the time the novel was written, marriage between cousins was not as taboo as it is now, but the reoccurring of incest here ties directly to the novel's themes. The marriage of Kathy and Linton, Heathcliff's son, is set up as a further instrument of Heathcliff's vengeance, which in turn is fueled by his passion. He doesn't even seem to care for his son or what Linton would want, only seeing him as a tool with which to further ruin the Linton and Earnshaw lines. About his father, Linton says, "I believe an interview would convince you that my father's character is not mine. He affirms I am more your nephew than his son." The incestuous relationship here occurs solely due to Heathcliff's meddling. Also due to Heathcliff's interference in everyone else's lives is the eventual relationship of Kathy, the daughter of the original Catherine, and Hareton, Hindley's son. Heathcliff treats Hareton sort of like he was treated, although better than Hindley treated Hareton. But there's a reoccurrence of this relationship where Kathy initially sees Hareton as beneath her, just like her mother saw Heathcliff as beneath her. Kathy, because of how Heathcliff has positioned Hareton, she sees him as this lowly servant. She kind of ridicules him because he can't read. However, they slowly begin to grow closer to each other, partially because they kind of recognize that Heathcliff ruined both their lives. Well, she knows that happened. Hareton doesn't really admit it. He actually admires Heathcliff, sees him more as a father than his own father. But Heathcliff's interventions in their lives and the way he impacted them leads to what's implied to be their eventual marriage. They're going to be together. So we have this prevailing of the original families, Linton and Earnshaw, and incest. Even more like this is real incest now. Wuthering Heights is a tale of passion and pain. Heathcliff and Catherine's forbidden romance is the story's core. His desire for revenge is the driving force behind many of the novel's events, and the reason he wants revenge, a lot of it is fueled by the fact that Catherine really didn't treat him well. She threw him aside because he was seemingly beneath her, and that led to the downfall of everyone around them. It is logical that the aspects of incest within the various romantic relationships in the story, specifically Catherine Heathcliff's, perfectly illustrate the themes of the book. Incest is almost always portrayed as unnatural and wrong. In the time period of the novel, a relationship of someone within a lower social class, like the one between Kathy and Heathcliff, would have been more striking back then than the actual incest. It's fascinating to see how the incest is more noteworthy in modern days, while a marriage between those of different statuses would have been more striking back then. The elements of incest further emphasize, especially to a modern audience, that Heathcliff's vengeance went far beyond what was natural or fair. He willingly tied the three families together tightly in the hope that he could destroy who had wronged him, destroy everyone, actually, not just the people who directly ruined his life. This drive for revenge comes from his passionate personality, as does his relationship with Catherine. The possibility of their blood connection illustrate that nothing could keep them apart. Key aspects of Catherine's and Heathcliff's characters are their single-minded determination to get what they want, and the other was the only one who would stand up to them and refuse them what they wanted. They were destined to spell each other's doom, and that of all those around them.